Hello dear viewer, this is teacher Auma once again, a teacher of mathematics and physics. Today I want us to look at a topic called linear motion. This is a Form 3 topic in physics, and specifically I want us to look at measuring speed, velocity and acceleration. Straight away we have two methods here that we can use to measure speed, velocity and acceleration. The first one here is using a tape measure and a stopwatch. Here is when you are given a tape measure and you are given a stopwatch. How will you use the two instruments to get the speed? Use a tape measure to measure the distance between, then use a stopwatch to record time. With the two, you will be able to get the speed. The second one that I want us to put much attention at during this lesson is using a ticker timer. We want to use a ticker timer to measure speed, velocity and acceleration. And I want us to use this question here to understand how we can calculate some questions under ticker timer. And then the question reads, the figure below shows the motion of a trolley on a ticker timer. The ticker has a frequency of 100 Hz. Number one, you have to know that a ticker timer is an instrument. And then it is always having an arm which always vibrates. And you realize that as the arm of the ticker timer is always vibrating due to alternating current, it always leaves some marks. And the marks are always left on a certain paper that is always run under the arm of the ticker timer. So for example, this one here is the paper here. And you realize that this paper here has got dots that were made by the arm of the ticker timer. So we use this paper here to answer these three questions. The first question here is calculate the initial velocity between A and B. That is 3 marks. The second one here is calculate the final velocity between C and D. Another 3 marks. And finally, we are going to calculate the acceleration of the trolley during the motion. Now, straight away, let us come to the solution part of it. So we are going to start with Roman 1, where we want to calculate the initial velocity between A and B. Now, how do we get the initial velocity between point A and B? The first thing, we have to get what is called periodic time. And periodic time will be 1 over the frequency. 1 over the frequency here that we are given to be 100 Hz. So I'll be having 1 over 100 Hz. And then let me punch on my calculator. 1 divided by 100. I'll be getting 0.01 seconds. Now this time here is also called a tick. So a tick is like the periodic time here. So it takes this ticker timer 0.01 second to make a dot. Now, let us use this time here to calculate the initial velocity. Now, when I want to calculate the initial velocity between point A and B, obviously I'll take the displacement here. That is the displacement here we are given 0.5 centimeters, and I have to change this 0.5 centimeters into meters. How do I change it into meters? I take 0.5, I divide by 100. I'll be having 5.0 times 10 raised to power negative 3 meters. Then I divide it by time, the periodic time that we have just calculated using the frequency there. So the periodic time there is 0.01 seconds. Punching again in my calculator, what am I getting? I'm getting 0.5 meters per second as my initial velocity. So this is the initial velocity. I've taken displacement over the periodic time, and then I've gotten 0.5 meters per second. So quickly I'm moving to the next question. Calculate the final velocity between C and D. Calculate the final velocity between C and D. Now, there is this point here, a dot made here by a ticker timer named C, and then there is this last dot here named D. So this one here is my initial velocity. I've used these two dots to get my initial velocity, and now I'm getting to use these other two dots, this dot here and this dot here, to calculate my final velocity. Now, take a look at the distance there. The displacement there is 5 centimeters. So I'll get my, let's say, velocity between C and D. And you also have to bear in mind that it's final velocity. So how do I get the final velocity between C and D? I take the displacement there, 5 centimeters, which is in centimeters. Therefore, I punch it by dividing it with 100 to get 0.05. So 0.05 is in meters. And then I put it all over the periodic time. The periodic time still remains to be 0.01 seconds. So we are having 0.01 seconds. So punching again, 0.05 divided by 0.01. What do I get? I get 5 meters per second as my final velocity. So from these two figures here, you'll realize that the velocity here is increasing. Initially the velocity was at 0.5, and then now it's 5 meters per second. So it's increasing. You can even see the closeness of these dots here, and you can also see the way these ones, C and D, are a little bit apart compared to the first two dots. Then quickly I'm moving to part 3, that is calculate the acceleration of the trolley during the motion. Acceleration of the trolley during the motion. So this is Roman 3. Now, for us to calculate acceleration, we always know that acceleration is final velocity v minus initial velocity u over the time taken. Now, how do we calculate the acceleration? I already had my final velocity here as 5 meters per second, so I come and write down 5 meters per second. And remember, in Roman 1, we got our initial velocity to be 0.5 meters per second. And then I divide all this by time. Now, here is where students have a lot of problems. Now, how do we get the time? For us to determine the time, we use the end point of initial velocity. This is where the end point of initial velocity is to the end point of final velocity. So we count the number of ticks in between. So how many ticks are we having here? 1, 2, 3, 4. So we are having 4 ticks. 4 ticks from the end of initial velocity and to the end of final velocity. So each and every tick was 0.01 seconds. So you take 4 times 0.01 second. Then you get the time taken. Now, punching on my calculator, what do I get as an answer? 5 minus 0.5. And then you divide by 4 times 0.01. I'm getting 112.5 meters per second squared as my acceleration. So, dear viewer, that is how we tackle questions under ticker timer. I'm uploading another video for another question. Please subscribe so that each and every time I give out or rather upload a video, you get notified immediately. Thank you so much.